Hello friends, this is Tony from Historic American Homes, and we're back at our chateau. So some of you may be watching these out of an interest in design issues, others may be watching out of an interest in how to use Sketchup, and maybe some of you are watching for both. This video, I'm going to try to keep it fairly succinct, short, and concise. It's going to focus on some basic SketchUp things, and I'm not going to go into anything in detail here. The idea is a quick overview of how all the parts fit together so that once we have our model, we can then move it from SketchUp to the program called Layout, which is part of the SketchUp package, and which is where we can actually break it into a set of architectural drawings that can be printed and used for construction. So there are four key elements, at least four key elements, that need to be considered when making your model in order for the process to be smooth all the way to the end. And that is we have tags, which you can see in the upper right corner of the screen. I have created tags. These are all created by me except for the first one called untagged. That's the default tag. So we have tags which we use to group objects. Objects can be grouped, nested in groups so that more than one tag can be associated with them. Next we have styles, and that controls how things appear. For example, right now I've got my screen using the presentation style. I could use the line drawing style. I could use design style. The next thing to look at is scenes, and you will notice across the top of the work area there's a row of kind of like tabs going across the top: design, all on, 1, 2, etc. Each of those is a predefined scene that I've created, and the scene remembers, if we look on the right where I've got the scene menu open, the scene tab, each scene remembers any or all of the items that are ticked. So I will click on Plan 1, and we will see that Plan 1 scene is remembering the camera location, hidden geometry, visible tags, active section planes, etc. So if I were to click on the tab up at the top of the screen here that says Plan 1, it would take me to that predefined view of the model with all of those elements that it has remembered. And then the next thing I'm going to point out is sections and section planes. So under the view menu we see section cuts and section planes. I will turn on section planes. Now we can see the section planes that I have already created. I have number 1, which I've just highlighted, which cuts horizontally through the building and gives me my first floor plan. Number 2 gives me my second floor plan. This one marked number 5 is a section lengthwise through the building. Number 3 is a section crosswise through the building. And when I double clicked on section 3, that made that section active so that I am actually cutting the buildings open and I can look inside there. I didn't erase anything. None of the model got lost. It's all the data is still in the model. But I can see inside here now where I have created this section plane. I will click on it again, and we're back to where we were before. So these section planes tie in with the scenes. So for example, the first floor plan uses this section plane 1. And so when I go up and click on plan 1, it's going to change my view, and it's going to make that section active. So there you see the view that is set up as the scene set up as plan 1. And that section, horizontal section, has cut through the wall partway up and allows me to see where the window openings are, the door openings, all those elements. I'm going to go back to where we were before. And I'm going to put one more section plane into the model just so you can see the steps. One of the things I do when I've built the model is I group everything into a single group. The entire model is in a single group. Section planes, they work within the group where they're placed. So I'm going to make a an item over here. And I'm going to go inside. That item is, that cube there is outside of the group that I've just clicked on. I'm going to go inside my group that contains the house. I'm going to go up to Tools, Section Plane. And the section plane will automatically snap to various surfaces, or you can force it to snap a certain way. I'll have it snap to the red by clicking on the right arrow, and I will put the section plane right there. And actually, I'm going to move it. And the reason I'm moving it is because what I want you to see is that the section plane did not affect this cube over on the right, which is outside of the group which contains the section. So that's one thing that's important to know about sections. I'm going to get rid of this and turn the section view sections back on. I can move a section plane once I've created it, in case I'm not happy with where I put it. Maybe I want one that passes through the walk-in closet. That's the study. The study and the master bedroom. That's the walk-in closet. Right, there's the walk-in closet in the master bedroom. So now we have a section that cuts through the walk-in closet and the master bedroom. And now I've selected the section. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to click on Align View. Now I'm seeing the section straight on. I'm going to go up to Window, I'm going to go up to Camera, and I'm going to click on Parallel Projection. My keyboard shortcut's F10. And now instead of seeing it in perspective, I'm seeing it in orthographic view. By choosing a different style, I have a style called Section that I've created that controls how the section view actually looks, and you'll see that it filled in the cut portions. Each of these things is worth a video on its own, so I'm not going to go into detail here about how to actually do each detail of the style, for instance. I'll make separate videos on those, but these are all the key pieces. So before we actually move from our SketchUp model to layout, I'm going to show you two more things that have to do with how I actually construct the model that are important to making it work better with layout. First of all, I separate finishes from structure. When architectural plans and sections are dimensioned, the standard is to put the dimension to the face of the structure. So if it's a wood-framed house, it's to the face of the wood studs, the outside, typically the outside face of the wood studs. This is because this is what the measurements that the carpenters actually need when they're framing the house. Once the walls have been framed to those dimensions, all the finishes can be added on afterwards, and they don't need to be dimensioned. They're built up against the surface, but when you're actually doing the initial framing, that's the dimension you need. So dimensioning is done to the face of the structural elements. For that reason, I separate my objects into structural objects and finish objects, and I do that by using tags. So if we look on the right where I have the tags, you can see that I have concept finishes highlighted, and then below that I have concept structure. So for example, a wall has two parts. It has the structural part, which is the 2x6 wall framing, and then it has the finishes, which is the plywood, the gypsum board on the inside, the plaster on the outside. So let's look at the first floor walls, and what we see here is the structural wall, which is the 5.5-inch stud framing that I've highlighted. It's not necessary to draw every single stud. I've drawn the wall 5.5 inches thick, which is the size of a 2x6 stud, and then everything else on the outside is finishes. This is all finishes. So when I turn off the finishes layer, all that's left to see is the structural framing. Or conversely, I can turn off the structure and turn on the finishes, and if for some reason I need to edit the finishes and the structural wall's in the way, I can get to it that way. So that's the first thing, dividing the objects up into structure and finish. I don't do that with every type of object, but where I need it, in particular walls, floors, and roofs, where I need to dimension, I use that approach. The next thing I do is I have, again, if you look on the right under tags, I have got concept 2-dimension and concept 3-dimension. Sometimes it's useful to have an object that's in a 3D version, but for which there's also a 2D version. So I'm going to take this window, for example. We're going to move a copy out here and take a look at how it's put together. This window has two parts. The main part of the window, if we look under what I've just selected, if we look under the entity info top right, it says concept 3D. Everything I've selected is on the concept 3D layer. There's also a little element down here that I've just selected, which is on the concept 2D layer. So I'll turn the concept 3D layer off, and you can get a good look at that. And what you're seeing is a kind of a plan view of the window, simplified without as much detail. And I use that because when I'm creating floor plans, for example, I will go to plan 1 and I'll zoom in. What we're actually seeing in the window opening with a very thin line is that 2D version of the window, because in my scene called plan 1, I have turned off the concept 3D tag and I've turned on the concept 2D tag. So we're seeing the window, but only the 2D part. If I were to turn on the 3D part, it would look like that, and that wouldn't look right when we make our floor plan drawings. It looks like a solid piece of solid wall, and we want it doesn't look like a window. There it looks like a window. I also use that a lot in doing the kitchen, because I find, for example, things like there's a hood over the stove here, and if I have, and I've put the hood on the 3D tag, and if I leave the 3D on, it makes this big rectangular block because it's doing a section cut through the hood, and I don't want that. I want to be able to see the stove underneath. Same with the refrigerator. I don't need to have the refrigerator cut through in section. So I have the refrigerator has a 2D part and a 3D part. So using tags to separate structure from finish, and using 2D and 3D. I'm going to turn off the finishes again and take a look at how the walls look with the structure, with the finishes turned off. When it comes time to dimension these drawings, when I move this into layout, it will be much easier to dimension them by being able to turn off the finishes while I'm doing the dimensioning. So I think I'm going to move on and point out the next step here, which is you can either go to File, Send to Layout, which will start a new layout file for your drawings, or if you've already got a template file, you can insert, which I have a template layout file that I use, which contains my border and everything like that. You can use File, Insert, and you can bring your model in that way. I have already got it inserted. What we see here is the Plan 1 view that we set up in Sketchup. And now it appears in Layout on my sheet of paper. If I click in the upper right to Sketchup Model, I've got that one highlighted. It's telling me the scene is Plan 1 from my file called FR01R1. And I have set the scale at 1/4 inch equals a foot. It's an orthographic view. And I've chosen a setting called hybrid. There's vector, raster, and hybrid. I'll explain those in detail later, but hybrid is the one I need for this. Hybrid allows me to see both the lines and the shading and the hatching of the walls. And that's how we actually insert our plan into layout. Once I had this sheet set up, I went to my menu called Pages in the upper right here, and I right-clicked on my sheet and I chose Duplicate, and then that created a new sheet that looked identical to the first sheet. I then clicked on my image from Sketchup and went up to Scale Sketchup Model, and at that point it said Plan 1. I then just simply changed that to Plan 2, which is what you see here. And that gave me the second floor plan, and it has the advantage of it setting it up on the same location on the sheet. So when I go back and forth between the two sheets, everything stacks up nicely and it's easy to read. I then did the same with elevations because I had created elevation views in SketchUp. I have two sheets of elevations, and so I'm going to be creating some section sheets. Now, what I have here is a duplicate of my last elevation sheet, and what I will do is I will simply swap these out for pre-made section scenes in my SketchUp model. So there's one more thing we'll take a look at before we finish this video. It's something that's relevant to this stage of the work. Let's suppose that you're going to be working with some engineers and they're going to be involved in doing some engineering on this house, and they need to have copies of the plans that are accurate and a perfect match to your plans. So there's a nice feature in SketchUp that allows you to extract from SketchUp a file type called DWG, which stands for drawing, and it's the typical file type used by the drafting programs such as AutoCAD, which is probably the most likely one that your engineer would be using. So what the engineer doesn't need a whole lot of this information that we see here. What they basically need are plans of each level. So I'm going to show you a simple process to do that. First we go up to View and turn on Section Cuts and Section Planes so we can see what we're looking at here. I want to create something I can send to my engineer for the first floor, and it should show the engineer where all the walls are, where all the openings in the walls are, because for example they might be planning on shear walls and they need to know where the openings are in order to mark the edges of their shear walls. So I've selected the floor plan section that cuts through the first floor. I'm going to turn off the tags that I don't need. For example, I don't need to have the doors and windows showing. I only need the openings. And I don't need to have the fixtures showing, so I can turn those off. And I also don't really need the finishes. The engineers are probably only concerned with at least at this stage, they're only concerned with the framing of the walls. So I've turned off the extraneous stuff, and I'm going to set up a view, a line view. I right-clicked on the section cut, Align View, and I'm going to make it a orthographic view. There, now I see my plan view, orthographic, and this is what the engineer needs. So I'm going to turn off the section plane lines again. Oh, I've also still got the grid on. Now, they will probably want the grid. However, I think it's usually most helpful to send them these things separately. So I'm going to turn the grid off. And then I'm going to go up to File, Export 2D Graphic, and I'm going to put it in my folder in a separate subfolder, and I'll give it the file name plus I'll put plan 1 and I'll put the date. That way if I've made revisions to the plan next week, I can send them an updated plan and it'll have a new date on it. Options, oh, and then I need to select Save as Type DWG. And we'll take a quick look at options. We're not going to change anything here, but should we need to, that's the place to do it. And export. So now if I go and look in my folder, I see that there is a new file in there, which is a .dwg file. Now I don't actually have AutoCAD on this computer, so I can't open that file and show it to you in AutoCAD. So what I'm going to do instead is create a new Sketchup file and import it, because you can also import DWG files into Sketchup. Alright, I've created a new file. It's empty. There's nothing in it at the moment. And I'm going to import that DWG file we just created. That was the file. Plan 1 with today's date .dwg. File name, options. I don't need materials. I might as well pick merge coplanar faces. It's not critical. And we're going to stick with the same units. So there it is. The floor plan, which is only got the stuff relevant to what the engineer actually needs. I'll make a plan view, orthographic plan view. Now with this, we know that the engineer is working with the perfect match of the dimensions we've got in our model.